Grimm's Fairy Tales, Little Red Riding Hood by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Once upon a time, there lived a sweet little girl in a cottage with her mother. Not far away lived her old grandmother, who loved her dearly and often brought her toys and gifts. One day she went to the market and came home with a red cap and cloak for her little granddaughter. The child liked them so much that she wore them everywhere she went. So she came to be called Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother said, "Come, Red Riding Hood, I want you to take these cakes and this butter and this jar of honey to your grandmother. Go straight down the path till you come to her cottage. Do not run for fear you fall and break the jar, and then poor grandmother would get no honey." "Yes, mother," said Little Red Riding Hood, putting on her red cap and cloak. She took the basket on her arm and kissed her mother good-bye. Off she went through the woods. As she walked along the path, she met a wolf. She did not know what a wicked beast it was, and so she was not at all afraid. "Good day, Red Riding Hood," said the wolf. "Good morning, sir," she said. "Where are you going so early, Red Riding Hood?" he asked. "I am going to my grandmother's, sir," said the little girl. "Mother baked today, and I am taking grandmother some cakes and some butter and a jar of honey." "Where does she live?" asked the wolf. "About half a mile away in the woods. The cottage stands under a great oak tree, and there are nut bushes nearby." "I will go to see her some day," said the wolf. He thought, "Ah, if only those woodcutters were out of the way, I would eat you at a mouthful, but I may get you yet." On he walked at her side. "See, Red Riding Hood," he said, "what pretty flowers are growing here. Would you not like to rest and gather some? You walk straight on as if you were on your way to school. See how pretty it is here in the woods." Red Riding Hood looked around. "Grandmother will be glad to have a nosegay," she thought. "It is so early that I can gather some flowers and still get home in good time." She forgot that her mother had told her to go straight down the path. She left it to pick some flowers a few steps away. Then she saw some prettier ones a little farther on, and so she wandered about till she was deep in the woods. Meanwhile, the wolf ran straight on down the path. He went to the old grandmother's house and knocked at the door. Tap, tap, tap. There was no answer. The grandmother had gone out to gather cresses from the brook and had not yet come home. The wolf knocked 3 times, then he pushed open the door and went in. There, at the head of the bed, hung one of the grandmother's caps. He put it on and pulled it down over his ears. Then he got into the bed. All this time Red Riding Hood was still gathering flowers. At last she had as many as her hands could hold. So she made her way back to the path and walked fast until she came to her grandmother's cottage. She, too, knocked at the door. "Who is there?" asked the wolf, trying to speak like the grandmother. But his voice was so rough that Red Riding Hood was frightened at first. Then she thought, "Poor grandmother must have a bad cold." So she answered, "It is I, Little Red Riding Hood. I bring you some cakes and butter and a jar of honey." "Pull the latch and the door will fly open," said the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood pulled the latch and the door flew open. In she went. There in bed lay her grandmother, as she thought. The wolf had drawn the cover up so that she could only see his head. He had pulled the nightcap as far over his face as he could, but his great eyes were shining out. Red Riding Hood put the basket on the table. Then she went to the bedside. "Oh, grandmother," she said, "what great eyes you have!" "The better to see you, my dear, the better to see you," said the wolf. "And grandmother, what great ears you have!" "The better to hear you, my dear, the better to hear you." "And what sharp teeth you have!" "The better to eat you up," said the wolf, jumping out of bed. He was just about to eat poor Little Red Riding Hood at one mouthful, but at that minute the door flew open. In came some woodcutters, and behind them the grandmother. The men had seen the wolf talking to the little girl. Fearing that he meant harm, they followed him, and on the way they met the grandmother coming home. One blow from a woodcutter's sharp axe, and the wicked wolf lay dead on the floor. And of one thing you may be sure, Little Red Riding Hood never stopped in the woods again to talk with a wolf.